Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about obviously the Grand Slam edition of Dynamite that was on Wednesday night. And it's an interesting one actually because the ratings this week, a lot of people were going to be very interested in, very excited about, paying attention to. For me, I really did think it was going to be the most viewed episode of Dynamite ever. And look, let's face it, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was still very high, but it wasn't the highest episode of Dynamite ever. It wasn't even the highest one in the most recent weeks, of course, because Wednesday's live Grand Slam edition of AEW Dynamite drew 1.273 million viewers on TNT, according to Showbuzz Daily. Now, this is up over 8% from last week's episode, which drew 1.175 million viewers. Dynamite drew a 0.48 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic this week. This is up over 9% from last week's 0.44 rating. The 0.48 key demographic rating represents around 627,000 viewers who watched the show from that 18 to 49 demographic. This is up over 9% from last week's 574,000 viewers in that 18 to 49 demo that the 0.44 key demo rating represented, according to WrestleNomics. Now, this week's 0.48 demo rating falls just short of the 0.49 key demo rating that Monday Night Raw drew in, ending Dynamite's 2-week run ahead of Monday Night Raw in the key demo, which is certainly interesting, and I think a lot of people will be talking about that. Now, when it comes to overall Dynamite this week, Dynamite ranks number 1 on the Cable Top 150 this week with a 0.48 rating in that 18 to 49 demographic. This is the 5th week in a row that Dynamite has ranked number 1 on Wednesday nights. Now, Dynamite ranks number 22 in viewership for the night on cable, which is up slightly from last week's 26 rating. Now, Dynamite drew the second highest audience of the year, the third highest audience in show history. The episode is tied with the August 25 episode for the third best key demo rating in the show's history. This week's viewership was up over 8% from last week and over 9% in terms of the key demo. Now, last night's Dynamite viewership, this is when we get into really big numbers. Last night's Dynamite viewership, or this week's rather, Dynamite viewership was up over 52% from the same week in 2020. The key demo rating was also up 50% from the same week last year. Now, of course, that episode went head-to-head with NXT, but it's certainly very significant. So there's a lot to get into there. There's a lot to break down. Obviously, those who do not like AEW, and I have seen it, will be like, AEW in the mud, get rid of AEW. Oh, they thought they were going to beat Monday Night Raw. They didn't. Roman Reigns, ha 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 ha. And the thing is, I see that, and I'm just like, man, why can't you just appreciate both? When people were pointing out that AEW Dynamite for the last 2 weeks had beaten Monday Night Raw in the key demographic, it wasn't a case of Monday Night Raw WWE in the mud. It was a case of that's really significant because no other pro wrestling company has been able to do that since WCW in the late 90s. It was more pointing out factually that's a big deal, and AEW is legitimate and it is competition. Why does this suddenly become like it's a sport and that you've got your team and you have to pick it? I just don't understand it. I really don't understand it. The fact that Dynamite this week drew 1.273 million viewers, and some people are mocking them for that. It's crazy. It's crazy. This time last year, they were doing half of that. Half of that. The key demo was half of that. Year on year, they've gone up 50% in both viewership and the key demo. That's ridiculous. That's incredible. They've been over 1 million viewers for the last, back to August 25th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. You know, that's just ridiculous. 5 straight weeks being over 1 million viewers. Of course, they're thrilled with that. Warner Media have released another press release this week because they're thrilled with that. Now, as I mentioned, I think there might be some people in AEW that might be a little bit like, you know what? I thought it might be a little bit better. And I thought it might be a little bit better, to be honest with you. I thought the viewership might be up a little bit more. I thought it was going to be the highest viewership in AEW history. And it wasn't. Why wasn't it? I don't know. Maybe they should have promoted it more. Maybe they should have... I don't know what they would have wanted. Maybe some of those matches that they're going to be on Rampage tonight, maybe they should have put them on the Wednesday's Dynamite. Maybe the CM Punk match should have been on that show. Whatever it may be, I'm sure AEW will look at it and they'll learn from it. But let's not look at this like it's a massive failure, because it's not. It's still a massive success. They generated over $1 million at the box office Wednesday night. No other pro wrestling company that isn't WWE has done that for years. So it's a massive, massive, massive success for AEW. And again, it's still up from last week. The rating is up from last week. And it will serve as a platform to continue. Again, it probably is disappointing to some. When I saw it this morning, I went, I thought it was going to be higher than that. And maybe there might be some that are disappointed in there. But the people that are, reveling in this like it's some giant WWE victory, I think that in itself speaks volumes. The fact that some people are like, see, WWE won. I thought AEW was in competition. I thought you didn't pay attention to Wednesday nights. I thought it didn't even matter. I thought that when AEW had beaten Raw in the ratings the last 2 weeks, it was unfair to compare because Monday Night Raw has competition and it's a different night and it's a different company. Either it's competition or it's not. Either you're openly looking at it or you're not looking at it. We should just celebrate that two pro wrestling companies are doing very well at the moment. WWE is doing very well at the moment. SmackDown's been over 2 million viewers, or over 2.2 million viewers for the last 6 weeks. They're always number one in terms of the networks on Friday nights, which is a big deal. Monday Night Raw, the ratings are a bit more volatile, but this week it was a big success for them. Even though it was 1.7 million viewers, and by Monday Night Raw standards over the year, that's not really what they want to be, where they want to be at. But still, I think they weren't number one in the night because of the strong competition from football. But again, like why is it suddenly like this big? In the mud, AEW? See, you're getting too big for your boots. AEW's up 50% year on year. Now, are they going to be up an extra 50% this time next year? Who knows? Who knows? Honestly, I would probably lean more to no, but you never know. You really never know at this point. Because pro wrestling, if we've seen anything and learned anything over the course of the last 18 months or so, is that anything can happen. So I think it was a big success for AEW. And maybe there might be some people that might be like, you know what? And I think it'll be fair, some people in the company that might say, maybe we thought that would be a bit better. But it is what it is. I think, again, it's still a success, still a massive success. Now, I see some people were criticizing, it's just crazy, criticizing the Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson match because it opened the show. It should have been the main event. Well, there's a reason for this. Now, AEW surprised some fans by opening this week's Grand Slam edition of Dynamite on TNT with the non-title dream match between Bryan Danielson and AEW World Champion Kenny Omega. The match, which was Danielson's in-ring debut for the company, ended in a 30-minute time limit draw. Now, it was noted by the Wrestling Observer newsletter that AEW officials put the match on first at 8 p.m. local time so it could go longer earlier on in the show without having a commercial break. The Danielson-Omega match just had one commercial break on Wednesday night. It is believed that Danielson versus Omega 2 will take place at AEW Full Gear on November 13 with the title on the line. So there you go. If you watch the post-show I did on Wednesday, or technically Thursday for me, but the post-show I did, I mentioned this. I mentioned there was a variety of reasons it could have gone on first. One being that they didn't want to have to cut the time because the plan was always for it to be a 30-minute time limit draw. And things go long on shows, even shows like this. Things go long, and that could screw the whole thing up. I mentioned that they would maybe want to do it so they could get the match with as limited commercial interruption as possible, and then they could make up for the time with ad breaks later on in the show. And that's exactly what it was. And those people that are like, it's such a massive mistake. It's a massive mistake that they put that match on first. Why? Why is it? Could arguably more people tune into a show. Certainly, if you want to look at Monday Night Raw, most people tune in at that very first 8 p.m. hour on Monday Night Raw. And then gradually, it goes less and less throughout the show. So there's an argument to be made that most people are watching during the first few seconds of the show. Why not start off strong? So again, those people I think are just looking for something to criticize, but that's, I guess, par for the course nowadays with people that don't like AEW. And I find it very, very bizarre. I really do. Now, Bryan Danielson took to Twitter and issued a statement on his AEW in-ring debut. As I mentioned, Wednesday's Grand Slam edition of Dynamite on TNT from Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City opened with Danielson and AEW World Champion Kenny Omega wrestling to a time limit draw. Going into the match, Bryan referred to it as the most important bout of his career. Bryan tweeted yesterday evening and gave thanks to the fans, wrestlers, and the company. He said, quote, "When you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Thank you to the incredible fans in New York last night. Thank you to AEW and its wrestlers for putting in the work to make last night possible. #gratitude. As I mentioned, there is a rumor that the rematch between Omega and Danielson is set to take place at Full Gear in November. Of course, if we get any official confirmation on that, we will cover it here on the channel. Now, let's move on and talk about Dynamite and Rampage. Of course, there was an announcement made a while ago that Dynamite would be moving to TBS in 2022, and Rampage would be moving to TBS in 2022. This is because the NHL is coming to Warner Media's platforms, and in an attempt to not be preempted all the time, they want to make sure that Dynamite would be moved to TBS so it doesn't have to be preempted. Well, it was revealed yesterday how Dynamite would be beginning airing on TBS on January 5th, 2022. The show will continue to air in the Wednesday 8 p.m. Eastern time slot. It was also revealed that AEW Rampage will continue to air on TNT, though, each Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, which is a change of plans as Rampage was originally scheduled to move to TBS with Dynamite next year. Now, a full press release was released by Warner Media. We'll read it in a second. It indicates that Rampage will permanently stay on TNT and will not be moving to TBS even at a later date in 2022. Now, Warner Media refers to Dynamite as a mega hit and touts their recent rating success. The press release mentions how Dynamite has been ranked number one in the cable top 150 for 4 weeks in a row, but was written before Dynamite picked up another number one victory with the ratings for this week's show, making it 5 weeks in a row. This is what the press release had to say. The All Elite Wrestling franchise expands its Warner Media footprint with AEW Dynamite moving to TBS beginning January 5th, 2022. Until then, AEW continues to deliver world-class matches and the most entertaining moments in professional wrestling today, with all new episodes of AEW Dynamite airing Wednesdays on TNT at 8 p.m. Eastern. AEW Dynamite is delivering its best ratings since launching in October of 2019. Its current performance has the show's strongest quarterly average ever in both total viewerships and 18 to 49, up double digits in audience in its performance a year ago. Most recently, AEW Dynamite has been the number one cable program on Wednesdays in people 18 to 49 for 4 weeks in a row, technically 5 weeks. Additionally, in 2022, AEW Rampage, which features the world-renowned stars of AEW, will continue to air Fridays on TNT. Since its August 13 debut, Rampage is ranked as one of the top cable programs on Friday nights. The second week of the show, featuring the debut of CM Punk, delivered the strongest ratings for the AEW franchise since the premiere of AEW Dynamite. So that's the case. It's going to be Dynamite on TBS and Rampage on TNT, which is an interesting one, considering that previously they said that Rampage was going to be going to TBS as well. So I think that's fascinating. And I guess maybe because it's just airing in that later time slot, you don't really have to worry about it being preempted. But time will tell. I suppose plans can change. About that. But January 5th, 2022, that's when Dynamite is going to be moving to TBS. Now, I know a lot of people, especially those outside the United States, ask, is this going to affect the ratings? Is this going to affect anything? The reality is not really. It's not really going to affect the ratings at all. TBS and TNT are essentially available in the same amount of homes. I think TBS might be available in 1 million more homes. It's nothing really, though. So it won't really affect the ratings or anything like that. So people that are worried about the viewership or the ratings going up or down or anything like that, it's really not going to affect that much at all, really. Speaking of TBS, though, we're getting a new championship in AEW, and that is going to be a secondary women's championship in the future. It is now being reported by Andrew Zarian of the Matman podcast that the secondary women's title will be called the TBS Championship. One can assume the new title will be a sister championship to the TNT Championship, currently held by Miro. Both Rampage and Dynamite will be moving to TBS in 2022. Now, Zarian broke the news while appearing on Denise Salcedo's Speak Now Pro Wrestling show immediately after AEW Dynamite Grand Slam at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, New York. Now, there's no word yet on when this new title is going to be introduced. Zarian also hinted at the possibility of Trios Championships being introduced at some point. There have been rumblings of such six-man titles in AEW for some time now. So when it comes to this, I spoke about this briefly on the watch-along that I did on Wednesday. I think personally the Trios Championship is more needed now because you've got so many trios on the roster, you've got so many factions, and it felt like right before the pandemic in sort of March 2020, February 2020, they were ramping up to do Trios titles. That's why you had Death Triangle come together Obviously, you had Jurassic Express, you had the Elite, which was Omega, and obviously the Bucks. It felt like that's where they were going to go to, and obviously the pandemic changed that and altered those plans. I still think they are going to do that in the future. It's just going to be a bit later on now. As far as the Secondary Women's Championship, I'm for it. I don't know if it was desperately needed. There had been some hints about women's tag titles, and I was really hesitant for that because I just don't see the women's roster having the tag teams there. And I think a secondary women's championship is smart because I think it's a way to differentiate themselves. I think they look at other promotions and they go, wait a minute, what don't they have? What doesn't WWE have? WWE has women's tag titles. Okay. What doesn't Impact has? Impact has Knockouts tag team titles. Okay. What does Ring of Honor have? Well, they have 6-man tag team titles. Okay. What can we do right now that's different? And that's the Secondary Women's Championship. And I've been saying over and over and over and over again that they need to invest more in their women's division. You need to have more women's matches on the shows. You need to have more women's storylines. You need to have all of that and better representation. I don't subscribe to the theory of, well, they just don't have the talent. I hear that so used to. Not as much now, but I used to hear all the time. They just don't have the talent, the women's division. Well, they do now. They certainly do now. They have the talent. And that secondary women's championship, I think, will be very beneficial. Absolutely. So I'm excited to see it. Who would be that first secondary women's champion? There are options, absolutely. Thunder Rosa, I think, would be a great name. You can see them on there. Anna Jay, Ty Conti. I think I would go with a Thunder Rosa, though. I think I probably would. I think that would be perfect. But she could be facing Britt Baker for the AEW Women's World Championship at some point as well. And also, look, it makes the AEW Women's World Championship feel bigger, too. It makes it feel like a legitimate world championship. So I think that's exciting as well. So I'm interested to see what that TBS Championship would look like. Now, CM Punk obviously is wrestling tonight at AEW Rampage Grand Slam. Of course, that was taped on Wednesday. And a bit of a spoiler here, it must be said, but you've probably seen it on social media at this point. CM Punk has brought back his trunks for this week's match against Powerhouse Hobbs on Grand Slam edition of AEW Rampage on TNT. Now, as noted, Punk vs. Hobbs was taped on Wednesday at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City to air during tonight's 2-hour Rampage episode. We're not going to say who won that match or anything like that, but we did talk about earlier this week how Punk issued a Twitter poll asking fans if he should wear the long pants that he wore for his in-ring return against Darby Allin at All Out, or he should bring back the trunks he wore in WWE and on the independent scene years ago. Of course, prior to that, he actually wore fight shorts, but he also wore trunks too. Now, Punk ended up bringing his trunks for the Rampage taping. The Twitter poll ended with 46,104 total votes, as 74% voted for the trunks and 26% voted for the long tights. So CM Punk, I guess, is a man of the people, and as you can see right there, the trunks are back. And that's CM Punk. That's really CM Punk being back. The promo he cut on Dynamite on Wednesday felt like a proper CM Punk promo, and now CM Punk back looking like CM Punk. It's just great. It's just great having CM Punk be back, isn't it? And awesome. And I'm very excited, very, very excited to see him wrestle Powerhouse Hobbs tonight on Rampage. I think it'll be very good. Finally, AEW has announced a new signing. And this one came quite surprisingly, actually, and kind of out of nowhere. But AEW has signed former NBA player Satnam Singh. AEW announced a couple of days ago that the first ever NBA player to be drafted from India has signed with the company and will begin training at the Nightmare Factory in Atlanta, of course run by Cody Rhodes and QT Marshall. AEW touted how Singh will bring his natural athleticism, charisma, and daunting stature to the company. AEW President, CEO, General Manager, and Head of Creative Tony Khan touted the signing and said he's deeply committed to cultivating homegrown stars in AEW. This is what he had to say, quote, "While we've recently secured some of the hottest free agents on the planet, I'm also deeply committed to cultivating our own homegrown stars and the next generation of extraordinary professional wrestlers. In addition to Satnam's commanding 7'3" structure, I was impressed with his high level of athleticism and charisma. He's an exciting addition to our roster, and I'm looking forward to our fans getting to know Satnam's personality and watching his development." Now, Singh was drafted by NBA's the Dallas Mavericks back in 2015, and he also became the first Sikh player to be drafted into the league. He's quite established, In July 2019, his NBA draft rights were traded alongside 2 second-round picks to the Memphis Grizzlies in a sign and trade for DeLon Wright. Singh has not played since 2019. So, it's an interesting signing by AEW. Historically, people that kind of height maybe aren't the best pro wrestlers, but it'll be fascinating. It's fascinating, and it's interesting that AEW are going down that route as well, of looking at the professional players and the athletes and stuff like that. WWE have going down that route, certainly, when it comes to their developmental system at the moment. But Tony Khan's right. Their future will be about making homegrown stars. And I don't know if Satnam Singh can be that guy, but certainly would be a very strategic move when it comes to the Indian market as well. So very interested to see how that one plays out. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these AEW news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Got the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.